Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me today because we have some very exciting General Hospital news to talk about, and it's definitely worth the wait. I've got to tell you, I've been really sitting with this whole situation around Jocelyn Jax, and the more I think about it, the more it feels like watching someone slowly step into a truth that's been hiding in plain sight for a long time. You know that feeling in life when something just doesn't sit right, and at first you ignore it, but then one little detail turns into another, and suddenly you can't unsee it anymore? That's exactly the kind of road she seems to be walking down right now. What really got me is how she's been connecting things back to Ross Cullum. At first glance, he might have seemed like just another figure moving around in the background of Port Charles, but the way things are unfolding makes me uneasy in a quiet, steady way. It's not loud danger, it's that slow kind that creeps up on you while you're still trying to make sense of it. And that snowstorm moment, I can still picture it in my mind. There's something almost symbolic about it, isn't there? White, quiet, everything covered and hard to see clearly. And yet there she was, digging through his things and uncovering that unsettling connection to Caesar Faison. I remember thinking, oh no, this is not just coincidence anymore. When that name enters the picture, it always feels like the ground underneath everyone gets a little less steady. What I find myself really appreciating is how persistent she's become since then. Even when it would be easier to step back, she doesn't. She keeps going. I've known people like that in real life, especially women, who just have this inner voice that says, something here isn't right, and I need to understand it, and they don't let go easily. There's a kind of quiet courage in that. Now, when Valentine Cassadine steps in with explanations about Cullum being deeply tied to WSB knowledge of Faison, I find myself leaning in a little more. Because Valentine never speaks without layers. Even when he sounds helpful, there's always another angle sitting underneath. It makes everything feel like a chess game, where half the pieces are still hidden. And then we have the unsettling part involving Anna Devane. I've always thought of Anna as someone incredibly strong, someone who has seen too much, survived too much, and still stands tall. So hearing that her mental state might have been manipulated, or that she may have been pushed into doubting her own reality, that hits differently. It's one thing to face an enemy head on, but it's another thing entirely when the battlefield is your own mind. What makes it even more disturbing is the idea that Cullum may have been shaping perceptions, maybe even pretending to be connected to Faison in a way that wasn't real just to destabilize her. That kind of psychological manipulation isn't just dangerous, it's deeply personal. It leaves questions behind that don't just disappear when the truth comes out. And I can't ignore what Carly Spencer added to all of this either. Her comments about Cullum mentioning Anna's mental condition feel like one of those small puzzle pieces that suddenly makes the picture a lot darker. It's not just about events anymore, it's about intent, about planning, about someone carefully shaping what others believe. At the center of it all, though, I keep coming back to Jocelyn. There's something about her position in all this that feels almost like she's standing at a crossroads. She could stay quiet, pretend she didn't notice, and try to live a normal life. But she doesn't seem built for that. And I say that with a kind of admiration mixed with worry. Because once you start pulling at these kinds of threads in Port Charles, you don't always get to decide where they lead. They tend to pull back. And now, knowing that Finola Hughes is returning as Anna Devane, it feels like the story is quietly building towards something much bigger. Not just answers, but confrontation. The kind where people finally have to face what was done, what was hidden, and what was believed in the dark. I find myself imagining that moment when everything finally connects. When Jocelyn speaks up, when Anna hears the truth, when the pieces stop being scattered and start forming something undeniable. And honestly, I think that's the part I keep waiting for, not just the drama, but that moment when confusion finally turns into clarity, even if it hurts a little to get there. And I'll tell you something like I would to a friend sitting right here with me. In Port Charles, clarity never arrives quietly. It usually comes in with a storm, a revelation, and someone standing there saying, I knew it all along. I just couldn't prove it until now. I've been sitting with this whole storyline around Jocelyn Jax and Anna Devane for a while now, and honestly, the more I think about it, the more it feels like one of those slow burning situations where everything looks calm on the surface, but underneath it's just waves building and building until something finally gives. If I picture it the way it unfolds in my mind, I see Jocelyn at a point where she can't really unknow what she knows anymore. She's not just guessing or suspecting things at this stage, she's piecing together patterns that feel too consistent to ignore. And that kind of realization changes a person. It shifts them from being someone who reacts to someone who feels responsible to act. So the idea of her going to see Anna doesn't feel far-fetched at all. And in fact, it feels almost inevitable in the emotional logic of the story. Now, when I imagine Anna, I don't see someone weak or lost. I see someone who has been through enough psychological and emotional pressure that even strong instincts can get blurred for a time. That's what makes the situation so delicate. If she is in a recovery setting, her mind wouldn't just be about truth or lies. It would be about stability, trust, and slowly rebuilding a sense of what is real again. And that's exactly why a visit from Jocelyn would be such a turning point. I imagine Jocelyn approaching it very carefully, not rushing in with accusations, not overwhelming Anna with everything at once. Because deep down, even if she is frustrated or alarmed by what she's discovered about Ross Cullum, she would also understand that Anna is not in a place where shock alone would help her. Shock can sometimes push people further away from the truth instead of bringing them closer to it. What makes this even more interesting is the idea that Cullum's manipulation is tied to something as psychologically loaded as Caesar Faison. That's not just a name, it's a trauma trigger in a way, a figure connected to fear, memory, and past danger. So if Cullum really used that association to distort Anna's perception of reality, then what Jocelyn is dealing with isn't just misinformation. It's emotional engineering. It's someone deliberately shaping fear into confusion. That kind of thing doesn't get undone easily. So if Jocelyn does walk into that facility, I don't think it would feel like a dramatic confrontation. I think it would feel quieter than that, almost like two people sitting on opposite sides of a long emotional distance, trying to find a shared ground where words actually make sense. And then there's the interesting possibility of Emma Scorpio Drake being involved. That detail actually adds a lot of realism to the situation in my mind. Emma isn't just a convenient access point. She's family. And family changes the tone of everything. If Jocelyn needed help getting in, she wouldn't approach it like a spy breaking into a secure location. She would approach it like someone asking, carefully and respectfully, for a chance to help a loved one. Still, even with Emma's support, I can imagine small tensions. Because intentions might be aligned, but emotional stakes rarely are. Emma's connection to Anna is deeply personal, while Jocelyn's involvement feels more investigative, more driven by pattern recognition and concern about a wider conspiracy. Those two perspectives don't always move at the same emotional speed. What really stands out to me is the possibility that Anna might actually be in a better mental space by the time this conversation happens. That detail matters a lot, because timing in stories like this isn't just background, it's everything. If Jocelyn arrives too early, Anna might resist or shut down. But if she arrives at a moment where Anna has regained even a small sense of grounding, then even difficult truths could land in a way that helps instead of harms. I keep thinking about what Jocelyn might actually say. Not in dramatic language, but in simple, direct words. The kind of truth that doesn't try to convince, just to clarify. Something like pointing out inconsistencies or gently laying out what she's found about Cullum's connection to WSB operations and his knowledge of Faison-related history. It wouldn't need to be overwhelming, just enough to make Anna pause and reconsider the narrative she's been given. And I also can't shake the emotional weight of what it would mean for Anna to hear this from someone younger, someone who isn't part of her long history of enemies and allies. Sometimes that matters more than authority. Sometimes it's the outsider who says something plainly that finally cuts through the fog. Of course, nothing about this would be easy. Even if Jocelyn again manages to get in, even if Anna listens, there's still the possibility of doubt lingering afterward. Because psychological manipulation doesn't just disappear when exposed, it leaves after effects. Anna might question why she believed what she believed, or whether she can trust her own perception moving forward. That's often the hardest part of recovery from something like this. Rebuilding trust in your own mind. And then there's the larger ripple effect. If Anna starts to accept that Cullum manipulated her using fear and false connections to Faison, that doesn't just affect her, it affects everyone tied to the WSB storyline. Everyone who has been operating under assumptions shaped by that manipulation. It could shift alliances, reopen old cases, and force people like Valentine, Cassadine, and even Carly Spencer to reassess what they thought they understood. So when I think about this possible meeting between Jocelyn and Anna, I don't just see a conversation, I see a hinge point, a moment where private concern turns into public consequence, a moment where two women from very different generations and experiences quietly stand on the edge of something that could reshape everything around them. And maybe that's what keeps me so interested in it. Not just the mystery itself, but the human part of it, the way truth doesn't arrive cleanly in Port Charles. It arrives through people, through hesitation, through trust being built and rebuilt in real time. And if Jocelyn really does end up sitting across from Anna and helping her reconnect the pieces of what happened, I think that moment won't just be about solving a mystery. It will be about someone choosing courage over silence, even when it would be easier to step back and let things stay unclear.
Thank you.